Midwinter Meeting. No one knew why, but the old man only turned up every 8 years or so, and never in the spring, no, always on the deepest, darkest days of winter. "He's really skinny," said Ted. "He always has been," said his dad. They were sitting in the dark at the small top window with their bowls of supper broth, watching the old man dragging his baggage along the snow-shocked road. They weren't alone in observing his progress. The deer, as ever, hung around in small packs along the street. Ted tried not to look at them. You weren't supposed to catch their eye. The street lamps flickered away frantically, but they were nothing against the blue dusk as it gathered in frosty drops about the old man. Finally he shambled to a halt, panting loudly, and had a rummage in his massive pockets. He brought out a candle, gave it a feeble shake, and watched its flame sputter into life. Ted looked at his dad. "Can you do that?" he said. His dad shook his head. "Nope." Ted's eyes went back to the window. "He must be from miles and miles away. Somewhere they have special candles." The old man dropped a hand into another sack-like pocket. This time he fished out a rolled-up sheet of paper, which he unfurled and proceeded to study. Then he looked up and hobbled towards next door's gate. He held his candle close to the gatepost and read the name carved there. He looked at his sheet. He walked back to his bundle of stuff. He untied it and took out a small packet. Turning back to next door's place, he took a great breath and flung the packet over the gatepost. It hit the front door of the house with the weakest of thumps. The old man retied his bundle and sank down onto it, his scrawny shoulders rising, falling beneath the baggy folds of his long grey coat. "He looks really tired," Ted whispered. "Do you think he wants some supper broth?" His dad's eyebrows rose. The idea had never occurred to him. "He might," he said. They crept down the ladder and Ted built up the fire under the pot. "Is he the same old man from when you were a boy, Dad?" "Certainly looks like it. Thin, big old coat, big bundle, big list, weird beard." "How many times have you seen him?" Ted's dad scratched the bald bit on his head. "How many summers have I seen? 40 now." "Well, I must have been about 4 the first time. I was terrified. I thought there was a ghost out there in the street." "And did he leave you anything?" Ted's dad shook his head and took a bowl from the shelf. The supper broth was simmering again, and he dipped the bowl into it. "Nah, not then. Later. Suppose I was 12 or so. Your gran had just died, and I was doing all the house chores. I know, 'cause when the parcel hit the front door, I was scouring the pot and I dropped it. I was that startled. Nearly broke me toe." "What was it?" His dad pointed at Ted's middle. "That. My belt." "Yep. Lasted well, that has. Lucky you give it me, really. I'd just lost me old one trying to save your gran in that bog. She took it with her, poor soul." He gave Ted the steaming bowl. "Handy things, belts." "I wonder why the deer don't mind him." Ted stepped into his boots. "Who's to say? Perhaps they don't go after the old so much." "They went after old Mrs. Gatchett. She was up that tree for 3 hours. "Yeah, she was. She's got a whole heap of spare flesh though, ain't she? Wouldn't have hurt her to let 'em have a nibble, eh?" Ted's dad let out a soft chuckle and winked. Outside, the sound of a wheezing groan carved through the glassy air. "Sounds like he's on the move again, son. Go on, do your good deed." Pushing back the bolt, Ted's dad opened the door and handed Ted his blanket. Ted wrapped himself up and wound his belt round the rough woolly cloth. "Won't be long," he said, and felt the whirl of air as the door shut behind him. In the snow, he pretended not to see the deer and counted them, like they'd been taught in the schoolroom. There were 48, but they looked bored and didn't move when he stepped out into the street. There was no one alive now who could remember exactly when the deer had overrun the town, nor what made them so hostile to the people there. "Something wrong in the old past," Ted's dad always said. The old man was heaving his bundle further up the road. Wading through the snow with a bowl of scalding broth was more than Ted could manage at any great speed, but it didn't take long to catch up. "Old man," Ted said, as loudly as he dared, with 48 deer looking on. The big bundle came to a slow halt, and the stooping figure in charge of it cranked his head round to see who had hailed him. Ted felt uneasy all of a sudden. The old man's character was a mystery to everyone. Was he friendly? Was he strict? Yes. It was an old voice, not like an old person exactly, more like it came from a time before anyone could remember. And the face was a crinkled, craggy thing, punctured with two fizzling green eyes that seemed a bit wrong, stuck among the folds of grey skin. They glimmered above the off-colour beard, and Ted felt slightly flustered. "Thought," he began, and then saw he had spilled a bit of broth. He tutted and tried again. "Thought you might want something warm." The old man took a step forward and peered into the bowl. "Oh my," he said, and the odd ancient voice took on a warmer tone. "And you came out of your home to bring this to me?" Ted nodded politely. "Brave boy." The green gem eyes shimmered, and the old man downed the supper broth in one long gulp and said, "Ah," at the end. He smiled. At least, Ted thought he smiled. The corners of his straggly moustache moved upwards anyway. "I'll put you on my list," he said. For next time, there was a sulk in Ted's words. "I'll be 18 by then." The old man nodded very slowly. "I know, Ted, I know. Waiting is a trying thing." He shambled back to the great bundle and flopped down onto it again. "But how can I get round everyone in one go?" "It's a small town," said Ted. "They only built the shop last spring." The old man shook his head carefully. "No, Ted," he sighed. "Not everyone in this town. Everyone in the world." Ted crashed down next to him, his mouth dangling open. Once his jaws started moving again, he said, "The whole world? No wonder you look tired." "Quite," said the old man quietly. "So my visits are seldom. If I came every year, how would I get to everywhere else? You can't travel quickly with a bundle like mine. I move from place to place, all year round, every year." They sat together in the still, raw evening, and the crisp chomp of deer nibbling snow-crusted grass accompanied their thoughts. A flurry of minutes passed, and then Ted said, "Dad and me, if we've got heavy stuff that needs moving, we put it in the cart and get Rudy to pull it." Rudy? Our donkey, said Ted. The old man's moustache moved upwards again, but the green eyes had a weary tint. I wend my way across snowy plains and boiling deserts, Ted. Wheels would soon split, and I'm not sure a donkey would cope with it all, noble creature though it is. Ted nodded. Maybe not a cart then. I don't know, if wheels aren't any good. What about a sleigh or something? And then a bigger animal to pull it. He paused, shivered, looked about him. He gasped. Yeah! An idea, Ted. The old man's eyes were glinting again. Dear! Ted crouched low as he whispered the word. Oh my, said the old man. They're strong and very bold, said Ted. And imagine a team of them. The old man's voice was younger now, all harnessed to a sleigh. Ted stood up and gestured to the roadside. Like this lot, he said, and his cheeks glowed red from the way the cold was mixing with his inspiration. And they like you, don't they? They hate us. They frighten the life out of everyone. It's because they're idle. The old man stood, lifted his head, filled his eyes with sparkles. I'll give them an occupation, Ted. I'll give them back their pride. They shall be my drivers. All of them? Every good team works to a rota system, Ted. And you go faster. You'd get round the world quicker. You could visit places more often. Indeed I could. The man and the boy grinned at each other as the sky released another spurt of snow. I might even fit in a few more meals, Ted. Ted nodded in concern. Oh yeah, you should really eat more. He picked up the bowl and brushed snowflakes from his blanket. Well, he said, I promised Dad I wouldn't be long. The old man gave a slow bow. Quite right, Ted. You go home. It's a sharp night. Thank you for your conversation and for the broth. Ted smiled. I'll bring you some more next year. The green eyes flashed and fizzled, and the old man went back to his bundle. He bent down to pick up the rope for pulling it, and his shaggy old coat fell open. You need a belt round that, said Ted. Handy things, belts. You're right about that, Ted. Throwing the rope over his shoulder, and with a massive heave, the old man began to plod away. Ted lingered, faltered, then finally, How do you know my name? He called. The old man, now some yards away, pulled up. Turning back to Ted, his eyes blazed out, and his grin was clear and wide. Ho, Ted! The voice was old and young, and all the ages in between. I know everyone.